Thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. A Glimpse of the Kingdom can remain free because of generous donors like you. If you'd like to donate, feel free to do so online, or you can send payments through Facebook Messenger. Don't forget to tell your friends about it so that they can enjoy this ministry as well. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any podcasts.
You can listen to my daddy every single day, like in the gym, in the car, or just at home. Glimpse of the Kingdom is awesome!
All right, we're in Matthew chapter 26. If you remember in Matthew 25, we had a series of parables and examples of we should be ready. We should be ready. And like the people who were given talents or portions of money, some invested it, some got to work while the Lord was away, and one guy buried it because he thought he was a mean God. The point is, this delay, I love how David Garland says it, the delay is not senseless and mindless. It's not just, well, tick-tock, tick-tock, where is he? God wants us to be active in the meantime. He wants to be doing things for the kingdom of God and being vigilant. So we have to be vigilant, but we're doing things in the meantime. We're not just, as it were, watching the sky to see what happens. The parable's being ready. Then he tells about the virgins and so forth, of getting ready, get the oil, get prepared. One is spiritually be prepared for the God comes, when the Lord Jesus comes back, we're ready. And the last little parable here, I'm not doing it, there's 5 or 6 of them, but this last one, remember the sheep and the goats? And I suggested, as many New Testament scholars do, that this is Jesus talking about how non-Christians treat his Jewish disciples. They are the little children. So he said, when did we feed you and give you clothes? When you did it to the least of these, my brethren. So this is not a judgment scene of all the people. It's just a glimpse of a scene when the Gentiles are judged. So in other words, these little ones are already ruling with Jesus. So this is not a scene of the final judgment scene that you see in Revelation. It's just a sign. It's an example of them treating them well. How God the Father, Son, and Spirit, but certainly here the Son of Man is going to judge people what they do. So what you do matters, and this parable is an example of what you do matters. Whether you do when you're prepared, you put your money in the dirt or not, that kind of stuff. So God wants us to be active, and in Matthew, in the early church, it was active being the church. Their mission was to go be the church, even in the face of persecution and all that we talked about last time. In chapter 26, verse 1, he says this, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, and unlike Mark, Matthew adds the word all these things, all. And that really is reminiscent of what it said of Moses in Deuteronomy 31, after Moses had said all these things. It's a good contrast here, because if you remember Deuteronomy, which is Latin and from the Greek means second law, Deuteronomy is, you can put it anywhere, it's fine. Deuteronomy is Moses' last farewell statement to the Jews before he dies. And he can't go to the promised land. Here the opposite is true. Jesus goes on and his people abandon him. But the idea that, of course, as everyone's known for a long time, Matthew presents Jesus as like a second Moses, but more than that. So after he finished all of his sayings, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days, the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. So here he's saying it's going to happen really soon. Then the chief priest and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Now we humans have found the ossuary, the bone box of Caiaphas. Actual physical concrete proof that Caiaphas of the first century, this high priest, existed. So we have his bone box in my kitchen. I mean, it's just weird, but... No, Caiaphas was real, and we have his bone box. If you don't remember, an ossuary is what you do when Jews buried the people who died. The corpse would go into a tomb. Typically, would go inside a culch, a little bitty, kind of a tunnel almost, a little bitty curve inside of a cave. The body would deteriorate for a year. They'd wrap it up, deteriorate. After 1 year, they'd take the bones and put it into a box, just long enough to fit like the femur bones and leg bones. And average person back then was pretty short, comparatively. If you didn't know this, the human race has been growing a whole lot in the last 150 years, not to mention the last few thousand. 150 years ago, the average British man, according to military records, was 5'5". So we've grown like 9 inches, and Danish men now average 6'1". So they've grown a whole lot, 150 years. Anyway, so boxes weren't that long, and that's what happened. They took the bone box and put that on a shelf and etched the name on it. We have Caiaphas' bone box. And he took counsel together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and to kill him. Right away, to know the fact that you want to get Jesus arrested to be clandestine or secret, that means they're really trying to get rid of this guy, Jesus. They're really trying to get rid of him. And the chief priest met at the same spot over and over, kind of like a Supreme Court, you might say, in Jerusalem. And they're trying to kill him. But they said, not during the feast, verse 5, lest there be a tumult among the people. We don't want people to go crazy. And the idea that people would go crazy in a feast is a good, wise point, because it happened for a long time before this and a long time after this. We know for a fact the Jews typically rebelled and went extra fanatic around Pesach or Passover, but any kind of religious festival will do. And they didn't want the crowd to be upset that Jesus was arrested. What we're going to see is the exact opposite happens. There is a tumult, but they want him crucified. So it happens, it flips. So they don't want the people to turn on them. The crowd turns on Jesus, actually. Verse 6, now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simeon the leper, Bethany is a town outside of Jerusalem, but you'll see in a little bit, at Passover you have to be inside the city limits, but right now it's okay. That's where we're staying outside. It's like there's a hotel outside of Jerusalem. And it's interesting, it's called Simon the leper, because we don't know if it's the same leper as before, if that's his nickname, but it's interesting that his name was Simon the leper, and even though he probably was healed by this time point. So he's in the house of a guy that no other Jews would hang out with, because they wouldn't be unclean. That's the guy Jesus is hanging out with. Though even at this point, he probably no longer has the skin disease. Probably not. Verse 7, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment. In Mark's gospel, it says of nardos. And nardos is typically left untranslated. Typically in translation it says of nard. We don't know what it is. It's probably some kind of perfume. And she takes it, this expensive ointment or perfume or oil, it's probably all the above. She poured it on his head and he sat at a table. So she pours it down and his long hair. Jesus probably had really long hair against all the families in the 40s and 50s who wanted their 60s, all you old people. Cut your hair. Jesus probably was a hippie. He looked like it. He put his hair up probably and put a thing on top. Anyway, so you imagine oil pouring down the back of his hair. When the disciples saw it, they're ticked off. Why is this waste? And throughout the gospel, we know that Jesus has cared for the poor and so forth, particularly if they're quoting from Deuteronomy 15. Everybody knew there's poor in the land, and you're supposed to take care of them. It's what Jews do. You're supposed to take care of the poor. Now they're upset for is verse 9. This ointment might have been sold for a large sum given to the poor. And it's highly likely that this very expensive ointment or perfume or oil was probably a wedding gift that was brought to her, or even a family heirloom. And this would have been a very, very expensive thing. So this is like pouring out, to some degree, a small thing of liquid gold on the ground. Like, why would you do that? You could go and sell and help a lot of poor. And what they're saying is very good and very right and very Jewish. So this is a good thing to say. And quite frankly, I'd probably been upset, same thing too, this woman. Why did you just do that? We've been walking with Jesus. We know Jesus cares about the outcast and poor. If you didn't want that stuff, we'd have taken it and given out, and we'd have found the homeless people with it. But Jesus, aware of this, he said to them, why do you trouble the woman? And I would have told him why. What I just said. I would have said, because you could help Jesus. Have I missed something? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. Again, that's also probably allusion to Deuteronomy 15, where it says, there's always poor in the land, but you're not going to have me. And here he's assuming that allegiance and devotion to him trumps everything else. So when you always have the poor, you're going to have the poor. There's never going to be a time when there aren't poor people. And you'll have time to take care of them. But there will come a time you won't have me in the flesh. Verse 12, in pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. I say to you, whenever this gospel is preached in the whole world, that what she has done will be told in memory of her. In Judaism, we learn later on in the rabbinic material, and it probably holds here, that anointing a body or burying a body in Judaism, when you anointed it with oil and wrapped it up with spices, as what happens to Jesus, that was the highest form of good deeds. It trumped almsgiving and taking care of other things in life. So preparing someone for burial it beat it all. So it's probably in the background here. The point is, she's preparing for burial, which trumps almsgiving or charity giving, what could have been given to the poor. So of course he's saying that's why it's okay. She's burying me. She's getting ready for me. And of course the disciples don't get that, even though they've told him about crucified. She doesn't understand. And we also don't know what the woman understood. We have no idea the woman went and said, I bet he's going to die soon. Let me go anoint his body. We don't know. She might have been so overwhelmed with glee that what do I do for this? What do I do for Jesus? I know what I'll do. I'll pour some stuff. I mean, we don't know what she was thinking. But that's what she did. And he said, this is what I'm perceiving it. And what's interesting is, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. What's interesting, that's true, because now it's in the gospel. We have no idea what her name is. She's the nameless hero. So we all remember, you remember that one her. But she's just nameless. And that's very interesting because for a few reasons. Well, let me do this little nerd talk for a second, because I find this really interesting. This is one of those things that are really interesting. I don't do this a lot in the gospel study on purpose, but I don't do a lot of historical, why we think it's historically accurate. A guy named Richard Bauckham and some others, Richard Bauckham is probably the most well-known. Richard Bauckham and some others have argued that one of the ways one might argue for the historical authenticity of the sayings in the Gospels is by looking at the actual narratives themselves. And there are certain telltale signs that seem to demonstrate that the stories, as they pass down to the oral community, pass down from the source itself. And what's interesting is, when you apply what he's saying, it seems to me, he makes a very compelling case that if you assume that when there is a name mentioned, that the story comes from the person who's named, it's amazing. When you assume that the person who told the story in the church is the name which got attributed to it, it's amazing how much sense it makes. Like when Bartimaeus tells a story and it says blind Bartimaeus, or in Luke when the walk to Damascus is happening and it says Ananias and the other one and the partner. Or someone said, time after time, you look at the story, it's amazing. If you assume that it's told from their perspective. Well, in this story, by the same logic, you would assume the woman didn't tell the story. But who? Who told, probably in the early church, who told the story, but it's not the woman? Probably the disciples. Because they don't know what her name was, just some woman who poured some oil on it. So the disciples tell the story. But now she's nameless. Anyway, it's one of the reasons why I think these little telltale signs that are probably very accurate. I'm going for a long time, but we got a lot of ground to cover tonight, but I won't do that. But so yeah, that's why a lot of times you might not care, but in historical work we do. And so anyway, there we go. Jesus has been anointed. He won't have time in his burial. Any questions or comments about that? No? I'm going to go kind of fast as far as not in depth as usual, because I'm trying to cover a good bit tonight, because next week we have to finish. No matter what, or however far we get, and I think we'll finish it. Verse 14, then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I deliver him to you? And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now, there are different prices for slaves in the ancient world. But if you know your Bible, and you would have gone back to Deuteronomy again, you would learn that if a slave died and it was your fault, you owed the owner 30 pieces of silver. So this is slave wages. So his betrayal is the cheapest possible way. It's a slam. It's a slam. So Judas is willing to betray Jesus for slave wages. Now the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples... first day of unleavened bread. After Passover, with this event that happened, was about roughly a week. There's another religious holiday right afterward. It's kind of like, it's not the same, but it's kind of like in America where you have Christmas and you have New Year's back to back, or even better yet, my birthday is December 28th, so I have Christmas, another national holiday, and then New Year's. But it feels like to me they go back to back, because by the time you have festivities and so forth. Well, that's what Jews did for Pesach, Passover. Unleavened bread came right afterward. So it wasn't uncommon at all to call the whole affair Passover, or the whole affair, unleavened bread. So now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover, Pesach?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain one," and you had to eat Pesach or a Passover meal in the city of Jerusalem and in the city precincts. So he says, "Go into the city to a certain one and say to him, the teacher says, my time is up, time's in. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples." The disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. So the point is, Jesus tells them exactly where to go. There's a guy who's looking for him. I do not think you should read this as some profound second member of the Trinity, prophetic, spiritual act. I think Jesus just had it prepared for him. He knew where he was going to eat the Passover. And that was his job, because he's the master, he's the disciple maker. And so he goes, "Go tell this guy you're going to see him over there." And so that's what happened. So he prepares the meal. Verse 20, when it was evening, he sat at table. Evening probably means about 6 o'clock, probably. This would have happened in April, because it always happened in April. Passover, the day where they kill the lamb was always Nisan 14. Nisan is what they called that month, and it's roughly the end of our March to roughly the end of our April, roughly, and it's in the spring. And anyway, so it was evening, probably about 6 o'clock. He sat at the table with the 12 disciples, and as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." Now, he's just a couple of I'll go pretty fast on this, because I've done sermons on this, and I will do more sermons on this, as long as I'm preaching on these topics over and over. So unfortunately, there's so much here that I won't go on, but little things like, so I'll go to some of these things. I'll highlight a few issues, and you can always ask questions or comments as we go along. When he says, "One of you will betray me," that's a really big deal. One of the chief virtues in Judaism and the Greco-Roman culture is hospitality and table fellowship. And to spare the scripture verses, there are tons of them spread out through the ancient world that you would suggest that it's a big deal. So, for example, Tammy has us out of house all the time. She was coming home, and she's hospitable, and she gives so much food and spread and takes care of us. It's awesome. In the ancient world, like it is the Middle East today, that kind of effulgent hospitality is a chief virtue. And it is a big deal that a person would betray that hospitality. Since it's a chief virtue, you don't betray it. So today it's a little different. I really, really appreciate it, but I don't appreciate it as much as people in the Middle East might, because I don't see it as survival. And a lot of people didn't stay at hotels in the ancient world. You might stay with friends and family, so you had to have a place to stay. And that was it's becoming a bigger deal than now, where I can I have a home, I can stay in a hotel if I need to. So it matters to me, but they really cared about it, and they got betrayed. That's a big deal. So he says, he's looking around his closest disciples, the guys he's been with for however long he's been in his ministry, and he says, "I'm telling you, one of you is going to betray me." It takes a lot of strength to eat dinner with a person you know is about to betray you. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" It really says, "Mituagamim," in Greek means, it means something like, "Not I." It is not I, Lord. It's a question, but it's in the negative. And Mark's way says it really well, but the point is, nuh-uh, like, I'm not the one. I'm not doing it. So it's not, really, who's the one? It's more of a defensive, like, you're crazy. I'm not doing it. No way, Lord. He says, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me." Now, if it's a standard Passover meal, which it probably is, they had these dishes, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can, like a Seder meal, and the herbs and the bitter spice and all that stuff. And they had different dishes and 4 different cups that went around. But the point is, they would dip the bread in these different ointments. He said, "The one who dips it here." Now, it could have been the case that exact very second, Judas is dipping bread. It could also be the case he's not dipping that very second. He's saying, it's someone at this table right now. Not, probably, as was assumed, is the women serving in the background. This would not have been just 12 disciples sitting here. I mean, it would have been all kinds of, particularly women would have served in the background. People could have come in the door if they wanted to, and so forth, if they wanted. But so we're not sure. Either way, the point is, he's right here. I'm telling you, he's the one who's right here eating a meal with me. Verse 24, the Son of Man, and he gives kind of a typical curse, you might say. The Son of Man goes as is written of him. That is, the Son of Man's doing exactly what God wants to do. I'm fulfilling my God-given duty. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. In other words, I'm doing what God wants, but this person is not. Woe is all, remember I told you, that's what the prophets always started out a judgment line. Woe to, and Jesus did the same thing. Woe to Chorazin, woe to Bethesda, woe to you. Capharnaum. It would be better for him, that man, if he had not been born. That's the standard way in the ancient world to say, that's bad news. That is bad news. And sometimes they would say it about themselves if they were wrong, like, may I be cursed, may I be struck dead. What kids say when they grow up sometimes. God strike me dead. That's kind of like Judas, who betrayed him, said, is it I, Master? And he says, well, you've said so. It actually says the same thing. Mitiego means, it's not I, Master. Right? It's not I. He says, well, you've said so. So the point is, he still has a chance to say, no, I'm not going to do it. There's still a chance out. But he's saying, you just said it. It's unfortunate that his name is Judas, because Judas is probably I think it is the most common male Jewish name of the time. Of course it is, from Judah, right, the great patriarch of old. To this day, that's where we get the word Jew. It's Judah, so Judas is the most common name. That matters. What's unfortunate is because throughout history, then Judas and Jew got conflated, and so Judas and Jew equals Satan. And so if you look through centuries of artwork, every time this is pictured, Judas is painted as a demon, because they say Satan was inside of him. And of course that got led into that all Jews have Satan inside of them, and all Jews have anti-Semitism and all that nonsense, which is silly and false. But that's how those names go together. As they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed and broke it. Now we don't know which one it is, which loaf he took, which whatever, but he does what all masters do. He's the champion of the meal. It's his job to do this. He gave it to his disciples. And no big deal there. Bless means he blessed. Bless, in Greek, eulogista, it's actually ephlogisas. It's the word we use for Eucharist. Is eucharisto. If you were today in Greece, you say efcharisto, means I thank you. And so eucharistos means a thanksgiving, a blessing in that sense. Blessing, of course, from the Latin, means a good word. So he's thanking God. He's saying a good word to God about the bread. Thank you so much for this bread that you provided for us. They had standard things they said. None of that stuff is weird. The fact that he takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, he's going to hand it out. It's part of the Passover meal. What's weird is what he says. So everything so far is normal until what he says is, take, eat. Like, yeah, thanks so much. This is my body. You hear the record straight. It's your what? We didn't see that coming. We've heard this so many times in church. Me too. We forget the profound uneasiness and ickiness they would have heard, that this is my body. It was a massive taboo amongst Jews to do cannibalism. And that's a massive taboo. So to say all of a sudden, this is my body, you're about to eat me, is not, yeah, I know what you mean. It's a good metaphor, Jesus. This would have been, in John's gospel, when he says this in John chapter 6, he says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you cannot be my disciple. And they debate it back and forth. And it finally says in John 6:66 that many left because they could not accept the teaching. I mean, it was so offensive. So this is a very bizarre. So we're having a meal about Israelites being free from slavery. And none of that's mentioned, because that's not the point here. And that's why, in my opinion, when Christians do these big Seder meals and bring in all the Jews and do all this stuff, I think it's not a good idea. The point is not the Seder meal. The point is not the Exodus. It's in the background. The point now is what Jesus is doing to redefine it. And that's not just because we're Christians. He's doing it. He's redefining it. This is my body. It is not the bread that the Israelites made in rush, hurry to demonstrate they've been free from slavery. This is my body. When you ingest this, you're joining me. You're joining you're partaking in my death. Does that make sense? And he took a cup, and I wish I could have seen their expression after he said that, because you wonder how many times they take this bite, kind of went, I'm not going to give you eat. I mean, that makes you wonder what they did, but we don't have that. This became such formula in the early church, we don't know how they responded. The earliest record of this event is from the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians. He writes to the Corinthians and tells them it's a very similar form. So we know this goes back ancient. We just don't have the response of the disciples. But then he took a cup. We don't know which cup. In the Passover meal, there are about 4 cups he uses. We might assume it's the 3rd or 4th cup later on versus early on. He takes cup, he give him thanks, same thing, he'd probably hold it up, two hands like a goblet. He praises God for the fruit of the vine, with standard Passover meal. And he says, drink it, all of you. You're like, yeah, sounds good. They'll pass around the meal, and he says, this is my blood. I mean, what? This isn't a big deal. Now, he adds blood of the covenant, which is, now Matthew's version, he says this, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins. The idea that blood is drunk, again, is horrible. It offends every sensibility a Jew has. It's a very poignant analogy or metaphor that Jesus is making. And it is a metaphor, and it is a metaphor. He doesn't literally think it's the bread, doesn't literally think it's his blood. He didn't break off a piece of his finger and said, this is my body. No more than when they would have said, if this is the bread of the Exodus. No one thought that was 2,000 or 3,000 year old bread from the Israelite ancestors when they did the Passover. They understand metaphor. It's still offensive. It's still to the senses. But the metaphor is powerful. Every covenant that was made, almost every covenant that was made in the ancient world was made with the killing of an animal. And so to drink the blood means my death poured out forgiveness of sins acts sacrificially. It's sacrificially. What's striking in Matthew's version is, if you'll go back and remember, I said this back then, and now I'm following the other end of this part. When John the Baptizer preached out in the Jordan River, he preached for repentance, for baptism. Repentance. In Mark's gospel, he says repentance and baptism for the forgiveness of sin. In Matthew, he drops out for forgiveness of sin. Matthew doesn't have it there. He puts it here. Matthew doesn't want you to be confused that you can't get forgiven from sins from John the Baptizer baptism. It only comes to the death of Jesus. So Matthew deliberately adds the expression, poured out many for the forgiveness of sins. He adds that to Mark's narrative. And he got it from Mark, probably, of course. But he wants you to understand that's where it comes from. I tell you, I shall not drink again of this fruit of the vine, which what they called their wine, until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And that's also a common Jewish thing to say that in the world to come. And a fruit of the vine, wine, was we don't know exactly. It was probably about 2 to 5 parts wine, alcohol. So it's a very diluted wine. They could have fancier wine, but in normal meals, it wasn't that, you might say, that fancy. I don't know anything about wine. I've never drank it before, but the history of what I understand, it's not a very fancy wine to have 2/5 alcohol. That is mostly it's water, but it is wine. So that's the wine he's passing around, and some kind of, so in other words, it is alcoholic. This isn't like a grape juice thing. This grape juice has been fermented, and that's what you did at Passover. In fact, they're known, to this day, little kids can get drunk because they drink so much wine. You just pour it. So the tone of the meal is not anymore about the Exodus and the Israelites being free from slavery. Now it's about Jesus forming a new people group who are now set free from sin. They're forgiven. So it takes a whole new meaning. And when they had sung a hymn, which was standard in this time period after it's done, they went to the Mount of Olives. They didn't go to Bethany because it's Passover night. You had to eat in Jerusalem. You had to stay there that night. But they just go to the Mount of Olives in the city limits. Let me pause. I know I'm going fast on that just because of time, but any question or comments about anything about that at all? I've heard that too, and I've also heard of the particular, and I was going to go this route, like the actual bread, the bread Coleman or something, the actual bread used and how this symbolism. And so there are people who make the argument that it had to have been that bread and the fourth. My response is, how do you know that? Because none of the Gospels tell us which one it is. Now, in fact, they only say he took the bread and took the cup. There's even no reference to other breads and other cups, ever. The only reason I even say it's probably third or fourth is if he's following standard Passover tradition as later rabbis describe it. Does that make sense? So I'm not against it. I just don't find it compelling because it doesn't tell me that. It's cool. And usually when things are so cool, it makes me go, oh, come on, that's too cool. But the answer is maybe, but he doesn't tell us any of that. And another reason why I don't do that, not to fuss about the idea, because I'm not against ideas, the other thing is when usually it comes to things like the redemption, which might be true, is that I just don't want to miss what I think Matthew is actually saying, if that makes sense. So the blood of the covenant poured out for many forgiveness of sin is what he's talking about. That is a redemptive thing, and that's cool. But I'd rather go with what he actually implies versus Same thing with the bread. Some say that has to do with particular bread. That's maybe, but anyway. This meal, I'll move on real quickly, but this meal, no, this is worth saying. This is worth spending a little bit of time on. The communion meal, this is called communion. It's called the Lord's Supper. It's called Eucharist, and different things throughout the history of the church. This was a very serious, sacred meal. It's one of the 2, maybe 3 things that the church for centuries thought were basic things Christians had to do. You had to get baptized. You had to celebrate communion. And some might add charitable gifts. But the big 2, baptism and communion. It was considered very much a sacred meal. The Apostle Paul demonstrates that to the Corinthians when he's very upset that they're divided over communion and they're divided as a community and they come with sins and he said, you corrupt it. You don't defile that. It's a very sacred deal. In the early church, we have evidence of what people had to go through called something called catechism. It's this instruction of what you have to learn to become a Christian. And the instruction of catechesis is how to treat them into catechism. And Roman Catholicism, I think, is still called catechism. That's a very, very old thing because it means teaching. But anyway, these catechumens, the students who went through this, we have some evidence of what ancient Christians did or required of them before they became a Christian. It's probably not universal, all churches everywhere, but it is insightful what they went. For example, one document called the Apostolic Constitutions, written probably around the 4th century, I'm not exactly sure who wrote it. It talks about what they do in their region of the empire, and it seems to be quite common, not controversial, that when a person wants to become a Christian, they have to be basically kind of mentored and watched by elders for 40 days, 40 days, 40 nights. But the whole catechism process can take 3 years. But the last 40 days are real intense. They have to fast. They have to be watched for those 3 years to make sure they've stopped sinning. They have to have an exorcism to get the demons out. And they always get baptism on Resurrection Sunday. So you come and bring your own fresh clothes. You bring your own food for communion and wine. And then the day of Resurrection Sunday, you'd show up, and then they would go through, do you renounce the evil ways of Satan? It's all written out. They would say, I do. Do you this? They would pray over you, pray again for the demons to get out. Do you renounce sin and so forth? Do you believe in the Father, Son, and Spirit? They go through all this. They get baptized. Seems to have been the case at times they got baptized 3 times. In the name of the Father, name of the Son, the Spirit. And then when they came out, they would have communion because now they can drink it together. Eat and drink together. And the last thing they did was the very last thing they were allowed to do for the first time ever is to say what most people call, they shouldn't, but the Lord's Prayer, the model prayer. First time ever. And it's because he says, Our Father who art in heaven. He wasn't your father before then. And so that's the pinnacle. And we know at least in that region that's what happened. So they took this as a big deal to come and bring a serious thing, as a serious ritual. It's a big deal. And I know what it sounds like, but David and his sin talk, it's a big deal. So that one of the reasons, that little short synopsis I just gave you is one of the reasons why I say every single Sunday on purpose. It is intentional. When I pray communion, if you'll notice, I say, Holy Spirit, please get any sin out of our lives before we take this communion. Please search our hearts and minds, because it is that big a deal. If we take this bread and go, oh, thank you, Father, so much, and I'm just swallowing it and drinking it, we are participating in the death of Jesus that gives us forgiveness of sins. And through the history of the church, that was not some light ritual. And that's a big deal. Not a perfection, but it means that I'm receiving forgiveness. I'm receiving the death that you have. Okay, well, I'll move on from that. Then Jesus said to them, another good positive thing, you're all going to fall away. Have a good night. And literally it says in Greek, you will all, scandalististhi, you will all be scandalized. Scandalized, we use the word scandalized, not much anymore, I guess. But to be scandalized literally means to trip up or to fall. So if I fall over this thing, I'm scandalized, I trip. Well, that's the same word used throughout the gospel when it says, whoever would cause his little ones to sin. It literally is to be scandalized. So it's a metaphor for sinning. It literally means to trip over a rock, which Peter becomes, right? He tells Peter when he says, you're not going to die like that. He says, get behind me, Satan. You're not thinking the things of God, but the things of men. See, Peter became a pebble in the way of Jesus. He scandalized. He was trying to scandalize or trip up Jesus. Here he's saying, you're all going to trip. You're all going to fall away. Not just Peter and his blessed little cockcrow that later on we'll have a long story in a second. All of you will. You're all going to abandon me. You're all going to fall because of me. That is, when it comes to whether you're obedient to me or not, you're going to fall. When you have to make the choice, stay with Jesus or flee, you're not going to stay obedient. And to not stay obedient, it means you're going to be scandalized. You're going to fall. You're not going to stay on the trek with me. For it's written, and of course, Matthew brings up mostly from Zechariah 13:7, but he throws in some Jeremiah. I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter declared to him, though they all fall away because y'all never fall away. I know, Jesus, let's look around. Look at these disciples. I know there's a bunch of sinners here, but I'm not one of them. Jesus said to him, truly I say to you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Now, roosters crowed all kinds of different times, at nighttime and in the morning, depending on where in the Roman Empire. But the point is, it's going to happen soon. It's going to happen real soon. Peter said, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And so said all the disciples. All the disciples said the same thing. No, we love you too much. We're devoted. We're going to go all in. Of course, even if I must die, I will not deny you. The answer is, well, of course, the irony, as the gospel of irony is, he does have to, in fact, die. But he has to die to self. He has to die to self. But he won't deny himself. He'll save himself. And Jesus said, whoever wants to save himself must deny himself. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. Gethsemane literally means, from the Hebrew and Aramaic, olive press, which means there probably was an olive vineyard nearby. Olive press is very common. It's one of the number 1 exports of the region. I've been to Gethsemane, the place typically considered Gethsemane. It is a little bitty place. I didn't expect it. It was probably about 2 of these rooms put back to back, like side by side, maybe a little bit bigger. And there was an iron fence along the edge, about as tall as this wood right here, this panel. You could just step right over it. And inside this spot were real old trees that they've dated to over 2,000 years old. So if you go, that's what I was told by the tour guides. I mean, unless he's mistaken or lying, which means I could have been looking at the exact trees that were there in Gethsemane. And it's a small little place. And nearby there was an olive press where this place, they found a big cistern where they would store water, which was used for the olives to grow. And that's why they think, it's one of the reasons they think is the actual Gethsemane. So he goes to the olive press, which is a little bit ironic, right? Because Jesus will be pressed too a little bit, but I don't make that much of that. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I go and pray. Go a little bit farther out and pray. So just stay here and watch. And take with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, right, James and John. It's the same 3 he took on the side of the mountain where they saw Elijah and Moses. Remember that? So the same big 3. He began to be sorrowful and troubled. The word for sorrow there is lupi means very anguished. He's very, very, very upset. And he said to them, in an odd turn of phrase, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. That is, I feel like I'm going to die. Going from Psalm 42:6, my soul in me is. Stay here and watch with me. Grigoriti is where we get the word Gregory. Gregory or Greg. Greg is Greek. Grigoriti means watch out, be vigilant. And that's what he says. So you were named here, Greg, or Gregory. Watchman, he's the watchman. And it probably means watch for the bad guys. Watch that no one comes and gets me. Why? So that he can leave. Watch and pray. Warn me if they're coming. And going a little farther, just a little bit farther, he fell on his face. That's interesting. Back on the Mount of Transfiguration, the disciples fell on their face when they saw Elijah and Moses. Here Jesus is falling on his face. And he prays, my Father, if it is possible, that is, if it's possible in your will, if it's something you want, not if it's logically possible, but if this is something you want, please let this metaphorical cup pass from me. That is, what's about to be dished out, what I'm about to drink, what's about to take place. Some people make a big deal about the cup, not big deal in a bad way. Some people make a bigger deal about cup and say it refers to the Old Testament when the prophets spoke about a cup metaphorically as God's judgment or wrath. That's possible. I just don't read it the same way. I just think it means metaphor for, because other times it's used just, what I'm about to drink means what's about to happen to me. So if it's in your will, if it's possible, Father, please don't make me do this. That's what he's saying. Please don't make me do this. Nevertheless, it's not what I want, but what you will. That is, I want what you want the most. Not to sound too, I don't know what the word is, theologically laden or cheesy, I think this is the most pivotal moment in the death of Jesus. When he gave up his will, I imagine is the hardest part. But maybe I'm wrong, I've never been crucified. But I say, not what I will, but you will. And he came to the disciples and he found them sleeping. So they're not watching, that's what he asked them to do. And he said to Peter, so couldn't you watch me just for an hour? We don't know what Pete said. In Mark's gospel, he says, but they were sleeping, like give them a break. Matthew says, he says again, verse 41, watch and pray that you may not enter in temptation. Or really testing. Paresmon in Greek means the same thing. Testing, trial, temptation. I don't think it's temptation by Satan. I think it means more a sense of testing or trial. That is, the trial or testing of this hour. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. It means you might want to help me, but the body in its exhaustion and all its desires wage war. And of course, probably, it seems to me, we're supposed to read that as the implication of exactly what Jesus is doing. That is, Jesus is demonstrating to his disciples precisely what one is supposed to do when the flesh fights against the spirit. When part of you wants not to do what God wants you to do because of distress and sorrow and fear and anger and troubledness, you pray. You ask for God's will to be changed if possible, but you submit to it no matter what. That's exactly what the disciples are supposed to be doing, but instead what they're doing is sleeping. They give in to the desires of their body. They give in to their fatigue. Like as Mark says in his gospel, they were so sleepy. They give in. If Jesus were to give in to his sorrow and troubledness, of course, he would have just bolted. His prayer would have been very different. And of course, I do think it's supposed to be a model for us. I preached on this when I first got here. I did a 4-part series on prayer. And I'm convinced this is, if you remember that at all, this is one of the prayers I went over from Mark's version. And it's supposed to be a model for us. It's the part, you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray. Watch and pray. The spirit might be willing, but the flesh is weak. And the only way to conquer what the flesh wants us to give up on is to pray. Pray for that strength. And relinquish our will over and over. And this is what Jesus is doing. He's denying his will. He told all of his disciples, whoever wants to come after me must deny his will, pick up his cross, and follow me. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's denying his will. And this prayer just proved it. All along the way, he's denying his will, denying his will. And he's telling his disciples, this is how you do it. You can't deny your will right if you don't pray. If you don't submit yourself, you're not going to deny it. You'll give in to anything else. And you won't bear your cross. And that's what happens. They don't bear the cross. They flee. So, verse 42 again, for the second time he went away and prayed, my Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. So it's basically saying the same thing over and over. He's begging God, please. Seems to be the case Jesus still doesn't have an answer yet. He's still holding out for hope. The Father's going to say, okay, I changed my mind. Verse 43, and again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. That's his version of what Mark said. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed. Notice he didn't wake them up. Like, forget it. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. And they came to the disciples and said, are you still sleeping and taking a rest? Look, time's up. And the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going, see my betrayers at hand. So he stops praying because he sees this little troop of people coming to get him. So it seems to have been the case that Jesus, I think we're supposed to take this implication. Jesus never got his answer. That is, his prayers cut off short because the bad guys have come. The disciples failed to keep watch. He didn't know. I think that's important because in the Gospels, and there was David Rhodes and Mitchie, they wrote this book years ago. It's a standard work on Mark. And I'd never seen it before until they showed it to me, that we're supposed to see this, I think, of how there's always hope. That is, Jesus, he told him he's going to be betrayed. Maybe Judas will change his mind. Well, he doesn't. Then he calls out to God the Father, and God the Father might change his mind too. And here comes the arrest of Judas, and never mind, that goes through. Then in Sanhedrin, maybe he'll be exonerated. Nope. What about Pilate? Almost. Nope. What about the crowds? Nope. In other words, time after time after time, we're waiting to see if God the Father is going to answer, yes, you don't have to drink the cup. So it builds the suspense and tension. But it also demonstrates what it looks like to deny your will all along the way, even to the point of the cross. And I think it's very, very, very powerful. And I think I preach on here, and I'll always preach on that, because I think it's a very good insight of what we're supposed to see the last few hours of Jesus' life. That even when the Father does not rescue, Jesus' answer, his prayers still answer, which is not my will, but you will. And notice in the narrative from this point on, once he's arrested, there's no more teaching, there's no more miracles, no more healing. This is all done. After Matthew says at the very beginning of the chapter, after he said all these things, basically it's over. The earthly ministry of Jesus basically is finished. No more healing the blind, the sick, the deaf, the mute. That's all done. It's all behind him. From this point on, Jesus is going to be an absolute victim to the governing authorities, mixed with the flip irony all throughout that he's doing precisely what God wants. So the evil people will think they've beaten him. Jesus will know they have not, but he's still scared to death. And so he has to stay obedient. No matter what, he has to deny his will to do what God wants. And so we see this incredibly brilliant and profound, seems to me, mixture, because it really relates to my life all the time. Not the same degree, I've never been crucified. But this flip of that evil people can do evil things mixed with God can still accomplish his will in the midst of what seems like evil. And it all depends on what perspective you have. When you follow the right thing, we know as the audience, we know he's innocent. We know he can do the right thing. At the same time, as I'm reading it, will the Father say, never mind? What's going to happen? We know from their perspective, they think he's a bad guy, but we know he's innocent, and so it builds this tension. But it does depend on your worldview. Verse 47, while he's still speaking, it's that soon. They don't watch for him. Judas came up, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd of swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. This would probably have been, you might call, temple police. These aren't local Judean, Israeli military. They're from the temple. Now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, the one I shall kiss is that man, seize him. We might look over that pretty quickly and go, yeah, like they're British. No. In the ancient world, that's not what happened. You kiss family and friends, and maybe disciples might kiss their master's hand or so forth, but it's a big sign of intimacy. The fact that, little footnote, the fact that the earliest Christians, when Paul says, greet each other with a holy kiss, we go, yeah, so what? Well, you don't kiss, none of y'all kiss me. Well, that's a big deal in the ancient world too. And that's one reason why the earliest Christians were accused of incest, because they kiss each other on the cheeks. But we don't know where they kissed them, probably the cheeks. But that's family and friends. That's how much you're supposed to treat each other as siblings. And so this is a big deal to be betrayed by the person who's treating you like their family and friends.
The French do that.
Like the French do, yeah. I'll never forget this one guy I hung out with a good bit in the undergraduate named Sean. He's not watching this, but he would laugh if he heard the story. One time I met his aunt, and he said, we pulled up, he had this real nice Mustang. He drove me where I was broke, so he did all the driving and buying the food. And so we pulled up, and he goes, this my aunt so-and-so, she's street. I'm just letting you know, when you meet her, she's probably going to kiss you on the mouth. I go, all right. So I walk in, I think it was a trailer, walked in, and she goes, hey! She's all out big, hey, Sean. He goes, hey, it's time, dude. And she won't kiss me. So I thought, we're friends and family. So that was it. So that was the first time I met a stranger before, and that's happened. Besides Elaine, she did it all the time. Everyone else had to marry her once it happened. And he came to Jesus, said, what's up, master? And he kissed him. I mean, this is absolute betrayal. It's planned. It's decided. It's just horrible. And anybody in the ancient world or heard that, like today, would have just been disgusted by this kind of betrayal. Jesus said to him, friend, why are you here? And they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus, and it mentioning, it doesn't tell who it was, not in Matthew, stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. In John's gospel, they give a name to that guy, Malchus. So he cuts it up. Shoo! Then Jesus,
Why did Jesus call him friend?
So why does he call him a friend? Good question. You said some people think Jesus colluded with Judas to
I
do
heard
this.
that said.
I've never heard that in my life. And humbly, I don't find that compelling at all. I don't think Jesus colluded with Judas. I see no evidence in the text of that. I think he called him friend because that's what it was just a nice gesture. It's just saying, I'm still treating you with respect. He's still treating his betrayer with respect. And friend, maybe it's worth saying, in the ancient world, there are different levels of friendship, all the way back to Aristotle. There are different levels of friendship. So today, if I say someone's my friend, we kind of do that too. We might say you have friends at work and friends at home and friends or whatever, but typically we make a distinction. We'll say colleagues or co-workers, or we have the word acquaintance. Most people, when they use it seriously, they'll say the word friend. They'll reserve that to people they really think there's a bond with them. They'll be with them. They really need them. Call them in the middle of the night. That's my friend, thick and thin. It's like that in the ancient world, but they use the word friend for all of that. They had different levels of friendship. The highest level of friendship was between two males of the same social status, which is one reason why homosexual behavior was so well accepted, because there were two male status of the same level, close friends who had apparently other benefits. When Jesus says in John's gospel, I don't treat you as slaves but as friends, he says, because I'm telling you where I'm going. He says, because I treat you like friends, because I tell you the master's business.
I think of David and Jonathan.
David and Jonathan, that's more of an equal friendship. That's right. But in the Gospels, I don't think we should read it that way. Because the only time Jesus says specifically to the disciples, I call you friends, he says, because, only in this way, I tell you my business. Because you can be friends at an equal level or friends below the level, like one up or two up. And certainly don't tell your slaves your business. You just say, take care of my house, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Here you're saying, I'm treating you as someone on the inside scoop. I only say that because sometimes the last 10 years or so, there have been real popular songs, I'm a friend of God, and he's my buddy, and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that's biblical at all. He's not our buddy. And I don't think this instance here is another example where, hey, what's up, Judas? Yay! No, he's still the Lord and Master, and they treat him that way with respect. Here's a term of endearment. Friend, what's up? Why are you here? Anyway.
He used to be in on his business, though, as one of the group.
Yeah, that's right.
That happened, so he just kept.
He used to be in the group, he sure did. It's like with my own children. They're not my friends. I've told them that several times. I tell them every night when I kiss them, you're not my friend, good night. I'm just kidding. To see if John was listening. They cry a lot, but it's the real world. But I've told them many times, you're not my friend. As I discipline them, I tell them I love. Well, we have those serious talks all the time, especially with Hayden, but with Julia too. When I talk about, in the office of parent, I'm not your friend. I'm friendly. I adore you. I would die for you instantaneously and all that. But my role is to be your parent, not your friend. And I'm saying that distinction is in the ancient world too. And that's how they would have seen Jesus. He's not the equal. He's not their buddy. He's the master. He calls himself that, Matthew. The rabbi, the teacher, the disciple is not above the master.
So we should not call Jesus a friend.
I don't call Jesus my
There's
friend.
a song, what a friend we have in Jesus.
Yeah, what a friend we have in Jesus. Yeah, he's acting friendly. In that sense, yeah. And I love this tune. I love the song. But technically speaking, no, I don't call Jesus my friend. Jesus is my boss. He's my Lord. He's my loving Lord. He's my loving boss. But he's not my buddy. I report to him.
He's more friendly to us than we deserve.
He's more friendly to us than we deserve. In that sense, sure, I don't have a problem saying, and people will say that, sing the song, I am a friend of God. That's the wrong key, but sorry for y'all. But that's, I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. No, he doesn't. He never calls me a friend in the Bible. When Jesus tells the disciples that, it's because that one moment. But I understand it. I've sung the song. I take it to mean he's friendly. He's caring toward us. He's loving toward us. That's fine.
So we're his children.
We're his children.
Like your children or your children,
Right.
but you're not their friend.
Correct. Well, I think that analogy holds pretty clear. Like my children are to me, I am to Jesus.
We're his children. but
That's right.
not our friend.
He's friendly to me like I'm friendly to my children. But I love them so much, and I'm there for them like a friend, but more, because I'm responsible to get them in shape. I'm responsible to form their character. And that's what Jesus wants to do with us. Friends are equals, and he is not my equal. I'm not his equal.
Not always fun and easy.
It's not always fun and easy.
No,
I obey him. He never obeys me. I never give him tips. I might try. I might try to give Jesus advice. But really deep down, I know that's just dumb. I relinquish my will to him. And that means I'm not his friend. I'm his subservient. And I'm fine with that. I welcomely deny that. I admit it and open it. He's not my buddy. He's not my buddy. Jesus said, put your sword back into its place, verse 52. Put your sword back, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. It means Jesus is saying, my kingdom is not going to come by violence. And every single Jewish leader that we know of in the ancient world, besides those called prophet, they tried to take it by force. I do not think, I used to kind of think, and I've changed my mind, I do not think this is a verse in support of pacifism. I do not think this is a verse that says Christians should never, ever defend themselves or should never even attack under certain circumstances. I don't think so. I think this is very contingently based upon the idea that whoever this is, if it's Peter, another gospel says it, but it seems to be the case, it's such a wild moment, at least in Matthew's text, we don't know who did it. They're just kind of, fight them. It's such a fast, quick. So I remember I was there, and one of the disciples took out a sword and tried to kill. It's just kind of fast-paced. And when he does it, Jesus says, stop it. No. And it reminds me of, you might have seen a movie called Tombstone. I wouldn't watch it with your Bible study group. But anyway, I love the movie. It's got some inappropriate parts, but I love an old Western. The guy's Kurt Russell. It's great. And there's this classic scene of the OK Corral, and the four are walking down the street, and all they're black. They look all awesome. And they come around the corner, and all the bad guys are waiting there. And they come around, and the main guy, what's the main guy? How's that voice, the big mustache? Sam Elliott. Who knows? Yeah, I knew a woman was going to say it. I knew a woman was going to remember the name. So Sam Elliott comes around and goes, hold! And he does this. He puts his staff out, and because the people are getting itchy. And he's like, he said, I don't want to go this way. I don't want to do this. In other words, we don't want to shoot each other up. And I always think of that scene when Jesus says, put your sword back. Like, that's not it. I don't want to do it this way. It seems to be the case that whoever this disciple was super excited. It's time for the kingdom of God to get here right now. Little footnote. I can't prove it. I strongly suspect, and I may be completely wrong, I strongly suspect that Judas thought he was pushing the hand of Jesus, so to say. I personally think that Judas thought by turning in Jesus, it would hurry up this kingdom of God stuff. That he wants the battle to start. I think so. And in a second, we'll learn that when it didn't happen, then he changed his mind, feels terribly guilty, and kills himself. He was really clueless. And I think this event itself, in my mind, this is further support. I wouldn't be surprised at all if among the disciples, mixed on teachings of Jesus so far, that they really did think, when we get to Jerusalem, he said, if you even have to die with you, that's not going to happen. I think they're still thinking this is not a ministry of self-sacrifice. When we get there, you're going to kick some tail. We got the Messiah on our side. We've seen a whole ministry of stuff he can do. Ain't no stopping us now. We're going to get him. And that's not what happens. Verse 53, do you think I can't appeal to my Father? He'll send me more than 12 legions of angels. That is a legion per disciple. 72,000, 6,000 troops. That's enough to wipe out, in their mind, the army of everything. No army would stand against that many thousands of troops at the time period. Nobody. And I'm a nerd, and I admit that. But I like movies a lot. And also in the book, it's in the book form. And The Lord of the Rings, at the very end, the king goes and gets this army of the dead. And this army of the dead comes, he says, come, I will fight for me, and I will release you from this damnation, this curse where you're roaming the earth. And they change the tide of the war. In my mind, that's what Jesus had in mind here. That is, if I asked my Father to really let loose, he would let loose. It's not a problem of power. It's not a problem of strength. It's a problem of will. If God wanted to force everybody in submission, he could do it. He could force them and kill the bad guys all the time. That's not the way that's not how God rolls. And Jesus has tried to show the whole time, whoever would be first must be last. Not to be served, but to serve. And on, I'm trying to tell you, it's not for force. Christians were horribly sinning in the Crusades. Every single time you hear that, the Christians, they were wrong. That's not the way of Jesus. We do not convert by the sword. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. It's not Christian, it's not Christ-like. Ever. That's not the way we do it. We do not force. We don't cajole. We don't manipulate. Jesus didn't do that. Verse 54, but how then should the scriptures be fulfilled? That it must be so. That is, he's trying to fulfill scripture. At that hour, Jesus said, and the scripture probably means to be handed over and fulfill God's will there as a victim. At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, because of time, there are multiple Bible verses that talked about him being handed over to the lambs, particularly from Psalm. And later on, he's going to appeal to those exact scripture verses when he's crucified. So I'll go there later on. But this idea that he was being handed over as a sheep for slaughter. Have you come out against a robber or a thief with swords and clubs to capture me? Is that how you came out with me? Day after day, I was sat in the temple teaching. You didn't seize me. Why? Now we know why. Because we were privy into the conversation. Because they didn't want a tumult of the people. They didn't want a riot. But all this has taken place that the scripture of the prophets might be fulfilled. And all the disciples took off. So we have this double thing going on. We know that their motivation is he's being betrayed to come find Jesus at night where people are sleeping or they're past their Passover. It's a little more docile. It's past their bedtime. This has been late at night, probably 8, 9, 10 o'clock. For this time period, that's late. So it's quiet. People are snoozing. They had a lot of wine for Passover meal, if those who took it that day. And that's why it's so secretive and awesome. Jesus, he interprets the event. You're doing this because you're trying to get secret, but instead, this actually is fulfilling what God wants to happen. It's like what Job said, what you intended for evil, God meant for good. And all the disciples fled exactly as Jesus said would happen. They all took off. In Mark's gospel, we have this bizarre little statement that says, and then this young man only had a linen cloth, was grabbed, and he ran off the linen cloth, fell on the ground, he ran off naked. It's the only time it shows up anywhere in the Gospels. Many interpreters think the young man who had the linen cloth was Mark himself. And if it's not Mark himself, it seems very bizarre to have the story, or someone Mark knew. But anyway, we don't know. We just don't know. But it's only in Mark. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest. He's like maybe this is not a good analogy. He's like the Pope. That is, in Jerusalem, he's the head of the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, where the scribes and elders had gathered together. This is at nighttime. This is illegal. This is bad. But Peter followed him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. That's very bold of him to get even that close, because they could have arrested him too. Now the chief priests and the whole council sought false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death, which again is illegal. In fact, if you're proven to give him false testimony, you should be killed yourself, according to Deuteronomy. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. So they should have reprimanded, disciplined the people who were lying. But they don't do that either. They're really trying to find a way to get him out of here. So this is breaking all the Jewish rules they know of. At least 2 came forward and said, this fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus was silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you, I command you by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. That's what Christ means. Christ means anointed one. The Hebrew is Meshiach, Messiah. Are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And that means the same thing in their mind right now. He's using it the same way. Are you the Messiah or not? Jesus could have said, yep, period, not that big a deal. They might have been upset, but it's not illegal, it's not immoral to think you're the Messiah. It's what Jesus actually says that makes him so ticked off. He says, you've said so. Those are the words you've used, just like he told Peter, right? Judas at the table. That's what you've said. It's like saying, yeah, I am. But I tell you, hereafter, thenceforth, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now that's almost certainly what gets him in so much trouble. And back to this, remember, Marty, we talked about this a long time ago? And I said we're going to talk more about it later. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel 7:13, we have this, about 7:12 to 14, we have only a few verses of a bizarre, seems to me bizarre, interjection, where Daniel had these visions of things, big, long narrative visions, and then all of a sudden there's a short one where he sees coming before the Ancient of Days on the clouds, that means in the divine presence, one like a Son of Man, who is given authority by God the Father to rule over nations. His kingdom will know no end. So he rules over as judge forever. And that figure is gone. After it ends, doesn't show up again. Later on in other Jewish literature, first Enoch, he will. But it became this mysterious figure of who is that figure who rules as God the Father rules? And goes right up to God the Father, like, what's up? He's not a sinner. Isaiah 6, Isaiah went to the temple and he about died. He had to purify his lips and everything. Ezekiel had to go to the throne room. So you don't just go before God the Father, everything's cool. But the Son of Man figure sure was, which tells us there's no sin. Who is this character? And Jesus uses that image to talk about himself the most. And so it's that figure, you might say, is to some degree a divine figure. Because he's not just a simple creature who had to go get forgiveness and so forth. And he's coming on the clouds of heaven. He's seated at the right hand of power. That's from Psalm 10, 1. And this becomes one of the most, if not the most cited Old Testament text in the New Testament there is. I'm almost certain it is the most common one to talk about Jesus' resurrection and ascension. To sit at the right hand. Psalm 110:1, my Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand. To sit at the right hand means to sit at his full authority right beside, to judge and rule right beside a person.
Doesn't coming on the clouds sort of like saying he's coming in his glory?
Kind of, I understand, and many interpreters, coming on the clouds of heaven comes from Daniel 7:13, and clouds were often used as a metaphor for being in the divine presence. Technically, we call it a theophany, when God shows up. It probably goes way back to the description of God in Deuteronomy or Exodus. Exodus. When Moses goes to the mountain, he's there with the clouds up high. Well, that became a common way to describe in God's presence with the clouds on the clouds.
So they get real defensive. They're like, who does he think he is? Pretty much, don't you think?
You're real defensive. Who does he think he is? Yeah. Yeah, in fact, he calls it blasphemy. The high priest, he tears his robe, which is a sign of grief and sorrow. It's what they did when the temple fell. They ripped their clothes. He says, like you've heard, blasphemy. Why do we still need witnesses? The point is we don't, because everyone heard it. You've heard this blasphemy. What is your judgment? They said, he deserves death. Now, what's blasphemy about this? Well, it's a little bit debated, but not really. Had he said the name of Yahweh, like I'm saying over and over, that could be blasphemy, because they could say he defiled the name. If he encouraged them to worship an idol or a different god, that's blasphemy. Those are surefire blasphemy. But here it is blasphemy. If you take the route to say, well, he was lying or he just tried to make up something, that's possible. I don't think that's true. I think he really thinks it's blasphemy. Why? Because I think he hears what Jesus says. In that sense, blasphemy, I did this way back, was it around Matthew chapter 3 or so? I can't spell what I'm talking. Blasphemy is a word we don't use much anymore. Now has a religious sense only. But in the Bible, blasphemy just means to slander. To say something badly about someone else's character. That's all it means, is to slander. You can blaspheme other people. You can blaspheme God. So here he says blasphemy. It's blasphemy. He means he's blasphemed or slandered God. How has he slandered God? Well, who cares? Well, that's a big deal. You're not supposed to slander or use God's name in vain. You're not supposed to do those things. So the reason why he's dishonoring or slandering or blaspheming God is because he's assuming divine prerogative when they see him as just a dude from Galilee. He's assuming divine prerogative when they see him as just a dude. So it's not that he said, and I hear this, I've heard, now I don't hear it now because I'm the one who preaches all the time for years, but as a kid, you'll still hear it sometimes. People say, it's blasphemy because he's claiming to be God. No, he's not. Nothing in the text says he's claiming to be God. He's not claiming to be God the Father. He's claiming to be the Son of Man figure who has the authority to judge over. Now on top of that, he says, then on, henceforth, hereafter, from the proceeding. The point is, I'll be your judge. So you can give me all the trial you want, but I'm going to judge you. And that ticks them off. He deserves death. Verse 67, they spat on his face, they struck him, they slapped him. Prophesy to us, you Messiah, who is that struck you? That is, if you really knew, if you really were a prophet and God spoke to you, you'd be able to tell us who's hitting you left and right, left and right. Later on, there's a rabbinic story where they suggest that the Messiah would be able to smell certain things and make judgments just by their smell, like they had a supernatural ability. It could be here the same kind of thing that he can't see and people are hitting him. He said, that was Bob, that was Sue, that was so-and-so. Of course, we don't have evidence that he did that. He sat there. Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard simultaneously is the idea. So while Jesus inside denying his will, being obedient, Peter's outside being disobedient and keeping his will. He was sitting outside in the courtyard and a maid came up to him, probably of the temple. You were also Jesus the Galilean. That's really interesting. It's very, very interesting. And I know you don't want to nerd talk. But historical perspective, this is the first time Jesus is called the Galilean. It makes it very historically, it's interesting that they would say that because it's what we'd expect in Judea. He's the Galilean. That's the name they would have called him nearby. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, it made me think of the lady with the bleeding problem that touched his robe. He couldn't tell exactly who. He asked her to speak up, right?
The woman took his robe. Yeah, he said, who touched me? I felt power coming out of me.
He didn't, specifically. So I imagine it might be the same.
Right. At least I agree with you. I agree with you. He said, so she said, it might be the same of the woman who touched him. He says, I felt a power come out of me. Who did it? Typically, you hear a sermon and say, Jesus knew, he knows everything. He just wanted that woman to confess it and publicly acknowledge it. I don't think that. I think he did know. I think when he says, I don't know, he did know. It's still good that she professed it, took courage, but I think he just didn't know. But again, I don't think Jesus was omniscient. I don't think he knew about quantum and quasars and black matter, and I didn't. That's a different issue.
He wouldn't be living much as a human if he had every little thing going on in his advantage.
Well, yeah, maybe so. Maybe he wouldn't be much of a human, you said. I wrote a blog on this, did a podcast on that, and you might not find it compelling. That's fine, but it's on my blog and podcast about and it's called "Was Jesus Omniscient?" There are those who argue he had to have been, or he was not God. God
He
kind.
doesn't know the final hour and day, only the Father knows.
That's one of the examples I would give. He does not know the final hour.
But he was kind of trapped in a human body, basically.
Trapped.
While he was here. Well, that was his vehicle.
His vehicle is a human body.
Human body.
That's right. And there are different explanations for why
Limited somewhat.
yeah. And that's a good, so maybe read my blog or read some other book. I'd be happy to give you, literature if you want. He says, verse 70, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. And when he wept, when we went to the porch, see, he leaves that, it's like, I'm out of here. Another woman saw him and she said to the bystanders, this man was Jesus of Nazareth. See, another name for Jesus, Jesus the Galilean, Jesus of Nazareth. And again denied it with an oath, I don't know the man. A little while, the bystanders came up and said to him, certainly, I know you are. I hear you talking. You sound like from Galilee. Galileans and Judeans didn't speak the same. As far as another research I did, Galileans are a little more sloppy on their vowels and their gutturals, and so they could stand out by their accent. He said, I can tell you're not from here. I met a guy today, he said, he's from Missouri. He said, that's Missouri, not Missouri. If you're from Missouri, you don't live that far from Iowa.
My family came from Colorado.
Colorado.
Red.
So right away I know he said, I said, oh, that's the distinction. Yeah, north or south. You're not, Missouri, Missouri. I said, okay. Your accent betrays where you're from. I came here and said, I finished the sermon one time, he came up and said, what did he say? You said some things today that offended me. You said something that offended me. I thought, oh Lord, what? I said, what was it? He said, you said a word today I didn't understand at all. And I said, what? He said, y'all. I said, whatever. He's being funny. My accent betrays me. Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I don't know the man. Curse on himself, that is, may God kill me. May God strike me dead if I'm wrong. I don't know that guy. And right when it happened, the rooster crowed. And remember, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. He's very sad. Poor Peter. I can't fathom what that would have been like in this kind of environment. The fever pitch, no one in the room next door. He probably could have heard slapping, beating, or people yelling at Jesus. And he's thinking, if I get caught, they're dragging my rear end right into the same thing. And I know what's going to happen. They're going to beat me up, if not kill me too. And so he's not praying. He ain't denying his will. He saves himself. And he weeps. When the morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. First thing in the morning. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him to Pilate, the governor. Now that would not have been that uncommon, because if they kill him, it's debated how much authority the Jews had to kill people. They seem to have had some authority to kill under certain circumstances at the temple. But it's difficult to tell, and that's a long, huge debate because of the evidence we have. It depends on when you date the evidence we have. But no matter what, it seems to have been the case. They want Pontius Pilate, they want him to condemn Jesus so that it's on the Romans. Because why? They're afraid of the crowds. Again, apparently they're not expecting, when it's time to kill him, the crowds turn on Jesus, not them. So all along, they might have been just fine. Who knows? But at the same time, the Jewish crowd who turned on Jesus might be doing that because the Romans are killing him. They might want to just show that we're for Rome. Kill him. We're with you, Rome. So they might have been right to do this. But anyway, in their mindset. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that he was condemned, the implication is he didn't expect that to happen. When Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, does your word say he repented? That's verse 3. Are you with me?
It says, I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood.
When he saw that he was condemned, some translations say he's repented, or he changed his mind, he felt guilty.
Seized with remorse.
Seized with remorse. That exact Greek word is interesting. Metamalithis is different from metaneo. Metaneo is the word always used for repentance or change your mind. It's a different Greek word. Of all the words to use. So I think it's important, and most scholars do. It probably, because it is a specific word, he always uses that Greek word for repent. To change it up probably is not artistic. It probably means he's not saying he changed his mind, that he got it all wrong, but rather he felt remorse. He felt sorry. Much like Peter felt sorry. But we don't know if Peter's repented yet. We know he felt sorry. Later on, we'll find out Peter repented. Kind of. But in here, we learn he felt sorry. But he does feel sorry. And he brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I've sinned in betraying innocent blood. That's a capital offense. That's a capital offense in Judaism, Deuteronomy. It's a capital offense, in which you can be killed for that. If you're part of the reason why an innocent party's been killed, you get killed. That's capital. You should get capital punishment. And he realizes he's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. We don't know exactly what happened to make him think that, but realize once he gets condemned, and that's why it just seems to me, I may be wrong, it seems to me that Judas thinks Jesus is innocent and good going into it. But once he gets condemned, he realizes this went south in a hurry. I don't think Judas expected him to be condemned. I don't think he did. I think he expected World War I, but with angels. But I don't have evidence for that. I just think all this fits together nicely. I think all of a sudden he goes like basically kind of, oh my Lord, this did not happen the way I thought. And he said, what's that to us? See it to yourself. That is, we're not in the business of making sure your sacrifices for blood guilt, that's not our role. He says, you're going to the wrong priest. I'm not here for that purpose. And throwing the piece of silver in the temple, he departed. And interesting, he threw it in the temple. Yeah, it's like blood money, but it's Jesus who does die, and it's just kind of this mixture of metaphors. He went and he hanged himself. Now, why do that? We're not sure, but it could be the case because it's his way of trying to atone. He is actually acting out the punishment that was supposed to be given to Peter. That's a capital offense. Since he was part of the process of killing an innocent man, the way to atone for that is that the person must die. Usually they kill the person, well, not usually. In Deuteronomy it says you're supposed to kill the person, but here he commits suicide, probably in a sense to pay for the bad he had done. But the chief priest, taking the piece of silver, said, it's not lawful to put them in our treasury since they're blood money. Now, you can't do it in the temple. So they took counsel and bought with the potter's field to bury strangers in. That is probably outside the city grounds. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Now, if the answer is yes, that's sedition. You don't say, I'm the king of the Jews when you're staring at the king in their mind. You don't do that. Jesus says, you said so. In other words, that's what you said. That's your claim against me. That's not what bandits usually said. So this guy already looks bizarre. Jesus already looks bizarre, surely, in his eyes. Like, what? But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he made no answer. He just sat there quietly. Then Pilate said, do you not hear how many of these testify against you? In other words, defend yourself. By the way, you don't have defense lawyers. You did defend yourself. You were your defense team. And he knows that the Pilate has the right and the legal right to kill him, to do whatever he wants. He's saying, you better make a case now. But he doesn't make a case. Verse 14, but he gave him no answer, not even a single charge. So the governor wondered greatly. What kind of rebel is this who sits quietly before he gets killed? Or whatever, who's being about his sentence? Why would you sit there quietly? It doesn't make any sense. Now in John's gospel, we have this long narrative of what happens, and Pilate goes and talks with his wife, and she has all this kind of stuff. And I mean, with Jesus, what is truth and all that? Matthew, we don't have that. We have something else different about a dream. But now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. We don't have other ancient evidence that proves this, but it is not at all unlikely that he would have done such a thing. And they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Baraban, Bar in Aramaic means son. Abba from Abba means father. Abba from Abba. So it literally means son of the father. So there's probably some irony here. So you have a son of the father and Yeshua, Jesus saves. And which one do you want to release? They want to release, of course, Barabbas, son of the father. They released the wrong son. Right here, kind of irony. So they gathered. Pilate said to him, do you want me to release for you Barabbas or Yeshua, who was called Messiah? For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, man, I wouldn't mess with this righteous man, for I have suffered much over him today in a dream. We might think that's so bizarre, but not in the ancient world, and not in Matthew's narrative. In Matthew's narrative, God speaks through dreams all the time, all the way back to the beginning with Joseph. So in the ancient world, they thought dreams could be omens. So apparently she has a dream that I would mess with him. He would have taken that seriously. Verse 20, now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the people to ask for Barabbas and destroy Yeshua. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with Yeshua, who is called Messiah? They all said, let him be crucified. And he said, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. Or literally, crucify him. Well, let him be is good. Let him be crucified. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. Now there's just a little story behind there, but I won't tell you the time. But of course, a metaphor. And all the people answered, his blood be on us and our children. And of course, in other words, if we're wrong, God strike us dead, that kind of stuff. In other words, they're fine with that. His blood's fine because he's guilty. They're mine. It's fine with me. Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. It's interesting, in movies and TV, Barabbas always looks like a crazy person. In the movie that came out, The Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson, Barabbas, he's all nasty looking hair, all fizzled everywhere, and he's like a crazy, crazy person. He's like a lunatic. But we don't have any reason to think that. It's much more likely that Barabbas, as we learn in another gospel, he was part of the insurrection. He was a warrior. He'd have come out with AK-47. I mean, he would have had a sword. This guy would look like he'd have been like a guerrilla warfare kind of guy. The soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the praetorium, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. See, Jesus now has been treated like a common criminal. And if you get a sentence by the governor, you can kill, but typically, as far as we can tell, they beat him. They beat him. They didn't beat him to death. They beat him. That was the punishment. And that's what happens here. So the first thing isn't to go crucify him. The first thing is to beat him. And then they go on to crucify him. But John's gospel has a few more steps in there. But anyway. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And plaiting a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, Hail, King of the Jews. Most people have usually taught that the crown of thorns is supposed to be a punishment, that they do that to make it hurt. A lot of scholars don't think that's the case. If you ever look at any kind of look up anywhere on Google or wherever, you'll see they'll have a crown that goes kind of down like this, and it looks like this. You've seen King Arthur and whatever, that have the rays. That's called various names. The radiant crown, the radiate crown, the solar crown. That goes way, way back to the Romans. They did that because it mimicked the rays of the sun. So many scholars think That's what they're mimicking. The thorns are not there to smash in his forehead. They're actually there to face outward. The thorns stick outward like rays. So everything they're doing is a mocking. So the crown of purple, like he's, scarlet, he looks like he's royalty. So, and the reed, like he put a staff. So here's he's beating him, and then they're trying to look like he really is a king. They're making horrible fun of him. So it doesn't. I don't think it is the case. I've changed my mind on this. I don't think it's the case that the thorns are there to make him bleed. They're there to. It's the best thing they can make up to make it look like he thinks he's the emperor. He thinks he's the king. And of course, they're trying to make him just look dumb. They spit on him. They strike him in the head. They mocked him. They strip him of the robe. They put his own clothes on him and led him away to crucify him. Okay, I'm going to stop there actually, and next time I want to come back to the crucifixion and resurrection.